So I let my nephew pick out my shirt for today. He was like, well, what about this one? Do you have that? Do you have that? And I'm like, no. Just go look at the shirts. And he's like, how about Demon Slayer? And I'm like, okay. So, time for Kinemon Part 3, which will cover the events of Dressrosa and Zoe. Okay. Yeah, Kinemon gets a lot of videos because he's there for a good chunk of the story, and he's rather involved in a lot of it during this time frame, so. Also, we get to just see some interesting and just very funny implications of his devil fruit during Dressrosa, which is just fun. Which I'll get to later and is the thumbnail. One thing I wanted to start off with this part was, and I'd forgotten to mention this in the last video, but we have the moment where Kinemon sees Momonosuke as a dragon for the first time. And something happens, and Momonosuke kind of gets scared, and he like pops into the dragon form because he doesn't have control over it yet, obviously. And he pops into the dragon form, and Kinemon just looks at him and then kind of freaks out because... And we find out later, of course, this is because, and, we find out later about, why Kinemon hates dragons so much is because of Kaido. If Kaido hadn't shown up in Wano, well, they wouldn't be in this situation anyway, but if Kaido hadn't shown up in Wano, then Momonosuke, Odin would still be alive and Kinemon wouldn't hate dragons. But he hates dragons, and Momonosuke is now a dragon, and he's a pink dragon. Hi, baby. Did you finally eat your breakfast? She's been being picky the last couple of days and stubborn and not eating her breakfast and her lunch or dinner when she is supposed to. You like your food? Don't look at me that way. It's good food. She's like, then you eat it. Well, it's not recommended for humans. So Kinemon sees him as a dragon for the first time and he kind of freaks out. After that, or somewhere in that time frame, we have, of course, where Law makes the deal with Doflamingo to trade Caesar at Greenbit and everything else like that. Kinemon and Momonosuke explain to the crew and Law how they ended up on Punk Hazard, explains that they had gotten shipwrecked and drifted to Dressrosa as they were leaving Wano, and then after that, their comrade Kanjuro was captured, and then Momonosuke ended up on the wrong ship, and that's how he ended up at Punk Hazard, and Kinemon followed him, and all of that. So that basically sums up that part. Then they arrive at Dressrosa, and they work on discussing the different teams that they're going to break up into. Kinemon is, of course, going into Dressrosa because he is going to try to find Kanjuro. And, of course, all the rest of them, Luffy, Frankie, and Zoro, along with Law. Well, Luffy, Frankie, and Zoro are supposed to go with Kinemon. Sanji ends up sneaking along with them. And then we have it that Kinemon uses his abilities, his, devil fruit abilities, to give them, kind of like the tuxedo looks that we see, or not tuxedos, but like suit kind of looks that we see them wearing for a good chunk of Dressrosa until they start, taking off their outfits. And he puts them into that attire, which is very good for the disguise purposes and everything else like that. And, a bunch of them are wearing like mustaches as well, which is just funny. Beards or mustaches, which is just, I do like it. It's funny. And what ends up happening is, of course, they end up heading into Dressrosa, and it's Kinemon that actually kind of explains to them a little bit about, like, the men, because he's been here before, not for very long, and he's being a bit exaggerative, but he's like, the men wear these suits, and then the women wear very revealing outfits, and I'm like, no they don't, Kinemon, no they don't. But, so Kinemon has that, which is like his perverted side coming out and everything, but they head into Dressrosa incognito, or at least as incognito as they could get. To be fair, Luffy tries his best. Luffy tries his best, which is an admirable thing in his case here. Luffy gets points for that. as they're going around, they end up eventually at a restaurant where they're just, enjoying the food and everything. And of course, Sanji likes all the food because, it's Dressrosa food and it's really good. And while they're there, they end up seeing this blind man trying to play roulette, and he keeps losing because the guys he's playing against keep lying to him. And, this is Isho, Fujitora, Admiral Fujitora of the Marines. So we're kind of getting that introduction there. Kinemon's there as Luffy has this, interaction with him, and they watch as he just, crushes the thugs with his ability, which is just okay, well, that's not good. Let's not make him angry. He can control gravity. That's bad. And they eventually they're just kind of left as, the bystanders, end up talking about, stuff that just gets mysteriously stolen, including Shusui. And, of course, Kinemon is now very angry at Zoro for this, because he's like, you lost Shusui, you lost our national treasure of Wano, how dare you? And Zoro's like, I didn't lose it, it was taken from me. So it's not Zoro's fault, but Kinemon and Zoro basically kind of make this deal or something where they're going to try to find the sword, and then if Zoro finds it first, Kinemon is going to fight Zoro for the sword. Do a duel with Zoro to get the sword from him. Get Shusui from him. This duel never exactly comes to fruition because, well, the Dressrosa arc gets in the way, and then other stuff gets in the way, and then eventually Kinemon is just like, yeah, fine, the sword's fine with Zoro for now. It's okay. We'll deal with it later. There are bigger, more important things going on right now. And eventually what ends up happening is Kinemon actually ends up getting lost and, separated from the rest of the group at that point in time. Because he's, chased by Doflamingo's men, and eventually he's surrounded by them. They start trying to tell him, Doflamingo's men are like, you better listen to us, or, something bad's gonna happen to Kanjuro if you attempt to fight back. So he just tries to run away again. Eventually he ends up running into Sanji, who then ends up defeating Kinemon's pursuers, and they end up learning that Kanjuro is held at the toy house, and, Kinemon asks Sanji to accompany him. This is, I believe this is also during the time frame when Sanji is, obviously already smitten with, Violet, with the Viola, and he's just like, ooh, I have my issues with Sanji. We're going to leave him on the floor for right now. That's not what this video is about. But what ends up happening is Sanji and Kinemon do end up watching on one of the, snail televisions as Luffy clashes with Jinchao in the video broadcast in the tournament. And they're just like, I thought we told him to try to keep a low profile. Sanji's like, in his defense, he did keep his mask and his hat on, his, mustache and his hat and, his disguise hat and, everything else on. He is still trying to hide a bit of who he is, so that's at least something. So they, watch as that clash happens with Jinchao. And eventually what ends up happening is, so it still takes a little while for Kinemon to end up finding Kanjuro. So there's a bunch of other stuff that ends up happening during this time frame. Yeah, he wants to find Kanjuro as soon as possible because Kanjuro is his friend and his ally, and he doesn't want him in danger anymore, and he feels he's been in danger long enough. And they want to go get Luffy so they can go to try to go get Kanjuro, but they're like, okay, Sanji's like, okay, well, we can't do that because the Marines have surrounded the Cordia Coliseum. So they just kind of watch as Luffy keeps fighting Jinchao, and of course Kinemon's cheering Luffy on at this point in time. And Sanji scolds Kinemon because he's being very, drawing a lot of attention to them. And Kinemon actually looks at Sanji and he's like, it's his belief that once a man enters a competition, he must aim for the top to be acknowledged as a real man. So it's like Luffy has to try his best in this, and he can't hold himself back just because he's trying to stay undercover. And I don't know if Kinemon would not know of the connection between Luffy and the Maramara no Mi because of Ace. Sanji would, but I don't know if Sanji is aware that the Maramara no Mi is the prize of this tournament yet. I don't know if he's been told that yet or not. That's a little bit debatable. I don't know if Sanji's aware about that or not. Not that Sanji wouldn't be supportive of Luffy in that regard, and Kinemon would definitely be supportive of Luffy once he finds out about like why Luffy's in the tournament in the first place. He would just be extra supportive of it. It was like he's trying to get something that belonged to his brother as the prize. I don't blame him for that. Later, they end up running into Zoro, who has Wicca with him, who's the little dwarf who keeps trying to give Zoro directions, and Zoro just keeps getting lost anyway because he's Zoro. You're a good girl. And eventually, they learn that Nami and the rest of the group back on the Thousand Sunny, which of course includes Momonosuke, are in trouble because Doflamingo is, well, at this point in time, they're having to deal with Giola. And Dofi is kind of on his way to go to try to get them because he's trying to get Caesar. And Sanji eventually gets his hands on Caesar, and then the rest of the crew end up sailing off. So, yeah, Sanji decides to go try to save Nami at that point in time. Leaves Kinemon with Zoro, so that way they can try to get Luffy to tell him what's going on, because Luffy can't get any information really inside the Cordia Coliseum. He's not informed of what's going on. Later, after Luffy's fight with Jinchao, they end up somehow getting the attention of Bartolomeo, who is, of course, just like, oh my god, it's Zoro, and he's just like, so happy that he's getting to interact with any member of the Straw Hats. And they're like, hey, we need you to go and get Luffy for us and bring him here to the window so we can talk with him. And Bartolomeo is just like, oh, yes, I'll go get him. And he just like goes off crying to go and try to find Luffy. I love Bardo. I love him. He's great. Eventually he is able to find Luffy and get Luffy to the window. And then Kinemon takes out one of the Denden Mushi that they have, and they're able to communicate with, have a conference with Sanji's group, that is the ones that are on the Thousand Sunny at that point in time, after he's kind of dealt with Doflamingo, and with Frankie's group that is, now I believe with the Tontada at this point in time. Because Dressrosa has so many moving parts, and the anime add in a few things here and there that's sometimes annoying. And too much filler and repeats of things. But what ends up happening is they have like this conference call where it's like, okay, so here's what's going on. Nami and the others who are on the boat, they have to leave. They're being pursued by Doflamingo. They need to get Caesar out of there, blah, 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 blah. Also, Big Mama Shanter has shown up, and they are not equipped to deal with Yonko's ship. Not at all. No, not equipped to deal with that. And what ends up happening is, from there, they have it that, so they leave, they explain what's going on with the Tontada a little bit, and that they have a plan. This is also where Usopp and Robin are, with Frankie and the Tontada. And so they're going through all of this explanation and explaining to Luffy what's going on. Then there is this big commotion that happens, because this is when Law and Doflamingo show up, and Doflamingo and Law are fighting. And Kinemon, admirably, tries to step in and tries to fight Doflamingo in order to try to help save Law, because at this point in time, Law is one of his compatriots. One of his, allies at this point in time. And so Kinemon tries to fight Doflamingo. From there, Zoro also tries to fight Doflamingo. Doesn't really go very well. They get knocked back. Law gets shot and taken as hostage, basically. At that point in time, they're like, okay, well, we got to get Luffy out of the Coliseum, so how are we going to do this? Thankfully, because reasons, unfortunately, the windows of the Coliseum are made of sea prism stone, which means that Luffy can't get past them on his own. And they don't really know where there's like an exit that Luffy could try to get to in the arena. Thankfully, inside of the arena, Sabo is there, and he's able to help get Luffy out and take over the guise of Lucy for the rest of the tournament. And of course, wins the tournament and eats the devil fruit and helps Rebecca and everything. But they get Luffy out of the stadium, out of the Coliseum, and then Luffy, Zoro, and Kinemon, who are now, in disguises. One's a cat, one's a fish, and one's a frog. I think Kinemon's the frog. Thanks to Kinemon's disguise, his devil fruit powers, which it's like, yeah, that's fairly well done. And they all have top knots, which is just funny because it's a Wano reference there. And they're running through the streets and everything, trying, in disguise, trying to get, because like now they can kind of pass as toys, because they kind of look like toys. And they're running through the streets, and eventually they end up running into Isho and having to deal with Isho for a little while, but they get past him. And then they end up... So, what ended up happening? So Kinemon knows that he needs to get to the toy house because that's supposedly where Kinemon is. They also know they need to destroy the Smile Factory, which is kind of what Frankie's group is working on to try to, destroy the Smile Factory and save Moshari. And of course, Usopp and Robin are part of the group with Leo that are trying to take down Sugar. So all of that stuff is going on at this point in time. And of course, Law is now currently a hostage with Doflamingo at the Dressrosa Castle. Along with everything else that's going on. And eventually they end up running into... The next major thing that basically happens is they run into Viola. Who is like, hey, I know where you are trying to get to, and I can offer you guidance to the castle. So you can try to get to Law and everything else. And so they take her up on this. And she helps them get into, of course, like the bowels of the castle where they're able to, find this, sneak their way in and everything. And which goes well, it works. They're able to sneak their way in. Zoro then ends up having to fight against Pika at some point once they get inside the castle. And then Viola leads Luffy and the Thunder Soldier, Kyros, leads them to go to try to deal with Doflamingo. And Kinemon somehow gets separated from the rest of this group because he got separated in Punk Hazard as well. But he gets separated from the rest of, from Luffy and Zoro's group. Which leads into where he is wandering around the palace. And, okay, you get an A for effort here. He uses his powers to, give himself an outfit that looks like Doflamingo's with, the big puffy pink boa coat and the pants and and blonde hair that looks more like an afro. So he gets points for that. Which is just funny. I love that he's in this outfit. It is so freaking funny. And he's just kind of strutting around. And it's a good enough disguise, I guess, that, Gladys kind of falls for him. He's deceived by the disguise enough that he tells Kanjuro, or that he tells Kinemon that Kanjuro had disappeared from the scrap house. So now Kinemon's like, okay, well, I need to get to somewhere else, wherever Kinemon would, or wherever Kanjuro would be. He's not in the toy house, and he's not in the scrap house. So where do I go from there? But I love that he's in the outfit. It's just funny. That's just great. Eventually, Kinemon does make his way out of the castle, out of the palace with Wicca's help. Eventually, he ends up discarding the disguise, and he ends up meeting up with Robin and Usopp. And they have, like, Wicca with them, and Kyros and Leo and everything else like that. Luffy has managed to get Law out of the castle at that point in time, but they're trying to get the key that they need, and he has Viola with him as well. This is unfortunately when Doflamingo activates his birdcage trap that is designed, keeps everybody in the island and slowly starts to encroach and shred the island. So he ends up forcing all of the citizens of Dressrosa into, like, the star survival game thing that he does, where, Luffy and Law and a bunch of the others, the rest of the Straw Hats that are there, the revolutionaries, and Kinemon, all end up with bounties on them. And Kinemon, of course, gets a bounty on his head. And, so to try to get, all the citizens in Dressrosa to try to turn against them. And have any of the bounty hunters that are there start trying to turn against them as well and try to capture them, which is, of course, kind of what ends up happening anyway. They fail, but you get the idea. And eventually, Kinemon ends up down into the hole that leads to the scrap heap area, hoping that he can find Kanjuro. And unfortunately, well, at the time, it's fortunately, but, like, unfortunately in the long run, he does find Kanjuro, who has been down there for however long and is eating lettuce made with his own devil fruit power, which is just weird. And, so Kinemon is just, like, so happy to see Kanjuro and everything. And at this point in time, all the citizens that had been, all the people who had, and people and animals that had been turned into toys are now, of course, released from that. So there's a bunch of people down there that had been toys that are now human again. And they want to get out. And Kinemon and Kanjuro are going to need to get out. So what ends up happening is Kanjuro uses the brush Nomi, which I love Kanjuro's devil fruit. I've stated this before. I love his devil fruit. He is horrible. And he goes through and he makes, the very badly drawn bird for him and Kinemon to use to get out. And they end up also Kanjuro ends up also drawing, like, the escape ladder type things, along the walls, so that way the, horribly drawn ladders, so that way the citizens and, the people that are down in the pit with them in the scrap heap pit are then able to climb out. And so they can, like, join in the thing. And they're actually kind of being, they aren't trying to go after Luffy and the others. Eventually, at this point, some point during this time frame, Kinemon and Kanjuro end up getting up on the King's Plateau where Usopp, Viola, and Riku are. And Usopp reprimands the two samurai for leaving behind the net for the citizens to climb because they're climbing up. So they get yelled at for that, which is just funny. Which I do like that scene. That scene is funny. And it's just like, and Kanjuro's like going to commit unalive himself, and I'd be like, now I'm like, do it. I don't normally root for anybody to do that, but in this case with Kanjuro, I'd be like, do it. Let it happen. Save you trouble later. Unbeknownst to you, it will save you trouble later. But what ends up happening is they then end up, because of Viola, she explains to Usopp that it looks like Sugar is about to attack Luffy and Law. And, so then Kinemon is there as Kanjuro uses his powers to help make the surprise attack thing that Usopp then fires at, fires at Sugar. And Kanjuro or Kinemon even says that it would be impossible from the distance, but they achieve it. Unfortunately, while all of that is happening, the citizens have managed to climb to the top of the plateau, and Kinemon and the others try to hold them back enough for Usopp to launch his attack, which of course works and knocks out Sugar, saving Luffy and Law again. And Kinemon is very impressed by this. But then by that point in time, him and Kinemon, along with several of the others, are now tied up by the citizens. Kinemon is also there as the citizens apologize to Riku and everything else like that. And they're like, we're sorry we did this. We're sorry everything that happened. We never actually gave up on you. But we had to at least do something to try to appease Doflamingo. Some of us tried to fight back at various points. And obviously that didn't work because we got turned into toys and everything. So there's like a bunch of that's going on there. So we get like those apologies going on. I don't know if you can hear her in the background. She's doing her indignant growling. To be fair, she does that even when I am petting her. So that's up to her. And what ends up happening is eventually they end up... they are there when Fujitora shows up and decides to put his faith in Luffy, like Riku, like King Riku has and everything. There are several other bits that are going on here. Kinemon and Kanjuro and Usopp are all screaming when Pika shows up and is trying to attack the King's Plateau to crush everybody there. They're also just very awestruck when Zoro manages to destroy Pika and, destroy the statue and defeat Pika and everything there. So he's just kind of there as a bunch of this other stuff is happening. They are able to... eventually, basically, what ends up happening, that's the next big thing that involves Kinemon and Kanjuro with this, is when it gets to the point where they're having to fight against the birdcage because it's now encroaching in far enough into the island that they have to trying to hold it back. So they are using Haki on their swords alongside Zoro, who is, of course, using Haki on his swords, trying their best to try to hold back, the birdcage. And Fujitora is there, and this is, of course, when a bunch of the future members of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet are there, trying to use their abilities and everything to try to hold back the wall, the birdcage as much as possible, even if it's just a little bit, to try to buy just enough time so that way Luffy can defeat Doflamingo, which, of course, ends up working. Which, of course, Luffy does end up defeating Doflamingo. Otherwise, why are we even talking about this? He defeats Doflamingo, and Kinemon is there, part of the big celebration when all that happens, and everything, and the birdcage collapses and everything, and then we get to like the 3 days later time frame where Kinemon, along with the rest of the Luffy, Straw Hats, and Law, are staying at Kuros's house during that time frame as they, recover and everything. They also end up having Sabo ends up visiting and basically giving them like the backstory as to like how he actually is Luffy's brother, and yes, he knows knew Ace as well and everything. And so that he's kind of, so Kinemon and such is like there for all of that moment. And, he's happy for Luffy that Luffy has like a brother back in his life now and everything. So he's happy for that, even though he doesn't have the full context of everything, but he's still happy for Luffy for the enough that he understands. And then, Kinemon, also with Kanjuro there, kind of watch a little bit as like the citizens are attempting to try to start rebuilding Dressrosa, at least kind of clean up the city a bit so they can start building again, start rebuilding. Unfortunately, this is of course when everything starts going to the hell in a handbasket again, where the Marines have shown up, they've decided to go after Luffy and the crew and everything, and everybody else who tried to help them. So of course now they have to do the Great Escape from Dressrosa, where, all of them are running through the streets, trying to get out, trying to get to the port, to get to where they have the ships all set up for them to be able to escape on. And of course, Luffy goes and deals with, Rebecca and the Kuros matter and everything. And eventually they all end up on Columbus's flagship, the Yonta Maria. And, Kinemon is there as the Straw Hat Grand Fleet is formed, and he's part of the big party that's going on and everything. So it's, he's there for that, which is good. And when they all get the pieces of Luffy's Vivre card and everything, and then of course Bardo is the one that goes and he's just like, okay, I'll help you guys get to Zoe and everything. So they follow where they have to go to get to where the rest of the crew is, and so they stay with Bartolomeo during that time frame. Yes, there's like the Silver Mine arc that happens in the middle of this. That's the filler arc, but I'm not really going to do anything with that because like Kinemon's not really involved with that anyway, and it's not canon, and it's not even interesting filler to throw in there. Then we get into Zoe. So during the time frame that they are with the Bardo Club, Kinemon kind of learns that the Bardos are kind of idiots, which is true. They're entertaining idiots, but they're idiots. And eventually they end up at Zoe. And they see the giant effing elephant that shows up out of the clouds. And they're just like, oh my god. And even Kinemon is just like amazed at the sight of the island. That's on the back of the giant elephant. So he's just like, oh my god, type of a thing. Which is fair, because I would have the same reaction too if that happened to me. If I was sailing in the ocean and then somehow giant elephant. How? And I've seen whales and they're huge. I've seen when I was like 12 or 13, my mom and I took a trip out to California, and we were in LA, and like right now there's all the fires that are still going in LA. God, I feel so sorry for all those people that are just losing their homes and their livelihoods and everything else like that. And their lives and everything. But we were we did like a harbor tour, and like we did see whales. I don't remember if they were blue whales or humpback whales, but we saw whales, and that was cool. And those things are so freaking huge. And this is just the Zoe is just so much bigger than any whale ever will be. No offense, Laboon. So then they have it that they're like, okay, they thank the Bardo Club for helping them, and they get to the Thousand Sunny, and they're just like, okay, so how are we going to get up there? And Kanjuro's like, well, I can draw, and he makes the pink dragon thing. And they all get on to Ryunosuke, and they're all, climbing up, riding the dragon as it climbs up the leg. And they're all just kind of talking. I don't remember if there's really too much. We get the explanation that they're searching for their ninja comrade, Raizo. So there's a bit there where it's just like, okay, we're going here. And then something drops toward them, which ends up being, the monkey mink, Barete, that is falling towards them, which hits Kinemon in the face, making him and Kanjuro fall off of Ryunosuke and fall down all the way down to where they thankfully land on the Sunny, because both Kinemon and Kanjuro are Devil Fruit users, and landing in the water would have been very bad for them. So they probably landed on the Sunny. Kinemon or Kanjuro may have been able to do enough of a, landing intervention or whatever, so that way they're able to, enough of a landing plan that they're able to land safely on the Thousand Sunny and not destroy everything. So Ryunosuke, along with the Straw Hats in Law, Luffy's group, are all heading up the rest of the elephant leg at that point in time. And it's like the fact that the dragon just, well, to a degree, we don't know the exact extent of, like, if Kanjuro died, would Ryunosuke just snap out of existence or what? That's never been explained yet. But so they're left to their own devices as they get up to the top. Kinemon and Kanjuro then try to climb up the leg again. And it's like, well, we'll catch up to them eventually. And they have Barete with them as well at this point in time. Because he's like, well, I have to get back up here anyway, so I might as well just, get along with these two guys. Maybe they'll talk about why they're here. And then Kanjuro ends up drawing the cat drawing of Neko Zaman, as they climb up the lake. Again, unfortunately, the cat ends up falling as well. And then they end up just spending that. It's like too late, and they can't. It's it's too late, and they can't end up because. So the reason that the cat falls, I had forgotten about this. The reason that the cat falls is because there is the eruption rain that happens because of, when Zoe, when Zunisha drinks the water and then, pumps it over its back to A, clean itself, B, it, of course, brings water to those that live on its back, those in the Mokumo Dukedom. And of course, that also means that the water now comes rushing down the back and down the legs. And this, of course, leads to where the cat ink drawing just disappears instantly as soon as it's touched by water. And then they end up all falling again. And they're like, okay, well, it's way too late, and we clearly can't climb this thing at this late at night because it's already, like, past sunset at that point in time or whatever. It's, like, sunsetting. And they're like, okay, so we'll stay on the sunny tonight, and we'll try climbing again tomorrow. So the next morning, they are able to finally reach the top. Kanjuro had drawn them another ride that was like a blue tiger that they are able to ride to actually get to the top of Zoe. And they run into, when they get to the top of Zoe, Kinemon asks the monkey about Raizo, and Barate just runs away after that, running to go and like ring the bell to warn them that other intruders have shown up. They also end up finding Frankie, Brooke, and Robin asleep. Well, they don't notice them, but they walk right past them, and they end up making their way into the Mokumo Dukedom area. And they're looking around, and eventually, first the Straw Hats show up and trying desperately to keep them hidden, because of course the Straw Hats are under the impression that, oh no, the Minks have already gone through so much in regards to trying to deny that Raizo isn't here and everything else like that, everything against Jack and all of that stuff and all of that. So now it's just like, okay, well, we gotta, Kinemon and the others might bring up something and that's not going to be good and everything. And then eventually it ends up being that, Kinemon and the others, Kinemon do end up interacting with Inarashi and Nekomamushi, and he sees that they're fighting with each other, as cats and dogs do, and he walks out and he ends up revealing himself to them, and he takes off part of his kimono and shows them the Kozuki clan symbol that's on his back. And he asks about Raizo, and and they do this perfectly in the anime, because it's like there's like this hold where you're like, oh no, this is not going to be good, something bad's about to happen. And then you just see this shift in the Minks, because Kinemon has revealed himself, he is a samurai of Wano, he is one of the retainers of Kozuki Oden and the Kozuki clan and everything. And you just see this shift, and I love it. I did a whole video where I talked about this. And the Minks all just, Inarashi, Nekomamushi, and all of the Minks go, Raizo is safe. And all of the Straw Hats, and Law, who I think Law is there at this point in time. He may not be. I don't remember exactly if he's there at this point in time. Because he's with them when they go to the whale forest, but I don't remember if he's there at this point in time exactly. But all the Straw Hats are just because it's it's this big thing to them as well, because the Minks went through so much to try to protect them, to try to deny that Raizo wasn't there and everything. And so there's all of that's going on. And from there you have it that they reveal that Raizo is safe, and then Inarashi and Nekomamushi start bickering like cats and dogs again, which then means Momonosuke steps in and scolds them. So they stop. And then from there, we have it that they end up escorting all of the Straw Hats that are there, and Law is there as well, escorting them to the whale forest, where Raizo has been hidden away, tied to the poneglyph. They get there, and, Kinemon and Kanjuro are so happy to see, Raizo, and, and Momonosuke is happy to see them as well, but Raizo is just so saddened to see Zou, the state that it's in. And because of Jack's invasion, and, Raizo is rightfully, scolding the Minx, going, you went through all of that. You cost so many lives, and, Inu loses an arm, Neko loses an arm, or a hand, and Inarashi loses part of his leg. And Raizo's just you are idiots and everything. But, what's done is done. And, they go back into the whale forest, and Robin reads the poneglyph, and they find out that it's one of the red poneglyphs, and this is where they, of course, learn about the road poneglyphs, and everything, and explain how, you have to find all 4 of them. There's, there are these red like this. You have to get all 4 of them. You line up the locations, and then it leads to the X marks the spot where the One Piece is. And they're like, okay. And so Kinemon and Kinemon is there during all of this, as all of this information is being explained. And then we get into the explanation as to how the Minx know the Kazuki clan, and by extension Kinemon and such. And we get the explanation that they have been allies with the Kazuki clan for generations, going back, 800 years. We learned this, that it goes back to the Void Century time frame, or possibly even prior to the Void Century. And that both Inarashi and Nekomamushi had once been retainers of Momonosuke's father, Lord Odin, and of course that Odin had been executed at the hands of Kaido and Orochi. We don't, at this point in time, we're not explained the exact timeline of it. We're not explaining that this happened 20 years ago, and then about the jumping forward into the future. That'll come in the next video when I talk about Kinemon 4, the 4th video. To be fair, if I ever did discussions about any of the Straw Hats, there would be, those videos would be, so many different that would be a serial series on every single Straw Hat anyway. Which would be something I wouldn't mind doing way at the end of after everything is finished for One Piece, for the manga is finished and the anime is finished. That wouldn't be something, I wouldn't mind doing that at some point in time. But that's not happening right now. But what ends up happening is, so they get the explanation there. And then, of course, we have it that they end up, they talk about how they knew, how, Odin had been to Laugh Tale, and how we knew Roger and everything. And a bunch of this other stuff that's not giving away too much information, but it is giving us, pieces of information that we'll need later. And we'll get the full context around later on. And all of that stuff. And what ends up happening is, of course, this is where they end up having it is the Ninja, Pirate, Minx, Samurai alliance that forms between the Straw Hats, the Heart Pirates, the Minx, and, Momonosuke and Kinemon and the Samurai from Wano. And, of course, you got to throw in ninjas there because of Raizo. And Shinobu later on. But, so it's so we get that the alliance is formed at that point in time. From there, we have it, of course, that Zunisha is attacked by Jack, and of course Kinemon is there while all of this is going on, and he's trying to comfort Momonosuke, as, Momonosuke is, his voice of all things is kind of activating, that allows him to understand Zunisha. Luffy can understand him too, but Momonosuke is the one who's able to communicate with Zunisha, and of course I'll go into that more when I talk about Momonosuke later on in this series, when he gets his own videos. But so they're there for all of that. Kinemon is there for that. And then they end up, after they've dealt with Jack for the second time, and he's been knocked into the water by by Zunesha, which, like, you know, knock him into the water and then have Zunesha, like, stomp around in that general area for, like, 5 minutes, and she's bound to, you know, the elephant is bound to step on Jack and just crush him at some point in time, even if he is a mammoth and a fishman and can breathe underwater. That's still going to do a ton of damage to him if Zunesha steps on him enough times. So yeah, Momonosuke is able to hear, you know, Zunesha's voice and everything. And then we get to the point where they just start to make their plans for what they're going to do. So the plans are, you know, Luffy, Nami, Brook, and Chopper are going to go and get Sanji away from the Big Mom Pirates, so that's where they're going to go. They're going to be the whole cake team. Then we're going to have it be that it's Nekomamushi is going to go off with some of his followers, his group, to go and try to get Marco, and then Kinemon, along with Law's crew, with the Heart Pirates, along with Zoro, Frankie, Robin, and Usopp, are going to go to Wano and start infiltrating Wano. So that way they can start planning, you know, getting information on the inside, reconnect with Kiku, see if they can find any of their other allies that are there. They don't mention Kiku at this point in time, but they're like, and then we're going to go to Wano and we're going to do this and everything. And they all go in undercover there. So that's where we're going to leave this one off. They're all heading off in their own different directions. Kinemon's going to Wano, and Momonosuke will be brought later. But I think it's that, because I don't think Momonosuke is going with them yet. I think Momonosuke is going to stay Zunesha with Inarashi for a little while, so Momonosuke can kind of start communing with Zunesha a bit more and get more used to that. But yeah, Kinemon's going to go with the group that's going to go to Wano so they can start infiltrating Wano, and all of that. Then we get to just the ending of Zou, where we get, like, a very good ending that I just like, where it's just like Luffy's just like, okay, and he loops his arms around all the ones that are coming with him, and then jumps off Zou, and that's just like, that's the last they see of them for, like, I don't know, not a month, but like at least a couple of weeks by the time they get to Whole Cake and back, and to Zuna and to Wano and everything. So that's like the last time that Kinemon sees them. For a little while, it's them jumping off, and like Zoro, Robin, Brook, Usopp, they're like, they'll be fine. And they are. They end up being just fine, but it's like, yeah, that's a fun way to end that bit. So they're gonna head off to Wano, and that's where we will catch up with Kinemon when I do the 4th video for this, for returning to Wano. Now, that might just be all the way up until they get to the Battle of Onigashima, and then Onigashima will probably end up being its own video as well, which would then make this like 5 videos about Kinemon. So, not that I mind that. Some of the other Scabbard videos aren't going to have as many because we don't spend as much time with them, but some of the other ones will be a little bit more involved. And then of course Momonosuke will have several, and I think Hiyori is, I think, at least going to have 3 for how I'm going to structure her videos, but we'll see what happens from there. So that's what I have for this one. I thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!